Well, hi, y'all. In the chat is a uh, handout for what we're doing today that you can take notes on. So if you want to take a minute and if you're at a computer, download that and you can kind of see where we're going. Um, Today we're going to talk about the idea of positive challenge. So just to describe what that is, if you're not familiar with it, um, most people have two tools for conflict. Um, by the way, I'm going to ask lots of questions. So if it's not noisy where you are, go ahead and put yourself off mute and just answer. Um, I'm not going to try to use the chat. We'll just talk. But most people have two tools for conflict. One of them's avoidance. The other one's confrontation. Um, so how many of you are avoiders? Okay. Yeah, Sunil, your whole culture is avoiders.
Yeah.
How many of you are confronters? You just love to get in there and mix it up with other people. I can't see everybody, but I see at least one hand. Good. So let's sort of play this out with an inanimate object, and we're going to pretend we're using both of those strategies. So if your car windshield has a crack in it, you come out of work and there's a crack in your windshield. What would avoidance look like, Sunil?
If there's a crack, I would think that I might have done something wrong or placed a car somewhere, and I try to fix it and not really go find out why, or if
Okay.
someone else had done the issue. Yeah.
So you make it your own fault. Somebody else, what's an avoider do if there's a problem with your car?
Ignore it.
Keep driving and hope it goes away.
That's right.
Okay, great. So how about someone who's a confronter? Your windshield broke on you. Act out confronting your windshield. What do you say?
My thinking is that it's something happened and
I want you to actually say what you'd say to your windshield if you're confronting it.
Oh, talking to the windshield. I don't think I'd
Yes.
talk to the windshield. I'd go and try to find how to take care of it.
Okay. Somebody else model a confrontation. What would you say to your windshield?
You want my Christian confrontation or
No. Just a confrontation. You don't have to be a Christian here.
I would probably swear and then think I got to get it fixed. That's what I would do.
Uh-huh.
So,
Who did it?
Mm-hmm.
What if you come out from your office and you see a little kid you see not a little kid, you see a high school kid hit a baseball in the parking lot and it smashes your windshield? Confront the kid. What's that sound like? You have a dispensation to not be a Christian for the next 30 seconds.
I think it would be a lot of frustration, but yeah, I definitely would not be happy that it happened.
You all are just such good Christian boys and girls.
What would you do?
If I'm confronting, I'm like, dang it, what are you doing hitting a baseball in a parking lot? Jeez. Do you know what a windshield costs? You ready to pay for this baby? That's what a confrontation might sound like.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to conflict, we have a tendency to either go all in or do nothing because we don't have tools for in between. So we end up either letting the crack in the windshield go, and a crack in your windshield just keeps expanding. It's going to get bigger and bigger. So we either do that or we try to fix the windshield with a tire iron, because we don't have tools for things other than that. What's the problem with confrontation? if you just go and start ragging on somebody, what's the fallout from that? Todd, can you do it so whoever's speaking we can see?
Yeah, tell you what, raise your hand and then I can spotlight you.
So what's the fallout from confronting? Think about times you've confronted people in the past.
Well, my experience has been when I've confronted and I didn't really understand the whole story. And it either brought up hurt, pain that I didn't listen, or just a real revelation that I'm not as bright as I thought it was.
Okay, good. What else?
Broken relationships.
Okay. So you use up relational capital when you confront. You put strain on the relationship.
Mhm.
And if you don't have enough relational capital to hold it together, that can break the relationship completely. Anything else? Fallout from confrontation? When you get confronted, what happens to you inside?
Go on the defense,
Okay,
or
give me
I
some.
fight.
Give me a feeling word or two.
I feel attacked.
Uh-huh. And when you're attacked, what do you do?
Defend.
I either defend myself or attack back.
Uh-huh.
Depends on how guilty I am. And I don't do it very often, but still once in a while.
Yeah. KO is a high D on the disc, I believe. So you're gonna meet force with force. Other people are gonna cringe or get hurt or shut down or whatever. So here's the thing with confrontation. Confrontation is naming what the issue is. You know, kid, you broke my windshield. Defining it as sin. You shouldn't be hitting a baseball in a parking lot and challenging your behavior. You need to fix the windshield. This is your fault. So confrontation includes those three things. So the problem with confrontation, because it defines things as sin, is it's overkill for any problem that's not sin. So if you have a misunderstanding and you confront someone, you've just blasted them when they don't deserve it.
Mm.
So confrontation is necessary, but reserve it for sin. You don't confront someone about they forgot to close the door. There are other ways to deal with that. So let me give you some positive challenge tools. These are on the handouts. Todd just highlighted that again. It's in the chat. So I've got 4 tools for you. One is proactive waiting as opposed to avoidance, open questions, making observations, and perspective change. And this is part of a suite of tools that go from less impact on the relationship, they take less relational capital to more. So proactive waiting takes no relational capital. They don't even know there's a problem. Versus at the far end of the scale is confrontation. So you can use these techniques and sort of escalate through them. And the object is, somebody's got to mute yourself. The object is to use the technique that takes the least relational capital. So preserves the most of the relationship and gets the point across. So proactive waiting. When I'm coaching and I'm doing proactive waiting, I see that there's an issue in somebody, but I don't see that they're ready to hear that yet. I believe when Jesus says, I can only do the things I see my Father doing, what he's saying is, I can't just change people. God has to have started a process, usually involving pain. God has had to have started a change process, and then I can come alongside that. but God is always the initiator of change, not me. So if I'm coaching someone and I'm thinking, geez, dude, your marriage is a mess, but they're not bringing that up, it's not my job to force the issue. There are times that I will force the issue as a coach based on what's been going on, but most of the time it's their agenda drives things. So what proactive waiting is I don't address the situation, but I do things so that when the time comes for the situation to be addressed, the groundwork is laid for us to have a good conversation. So, let's see. Let's say somebody, is always late to work, and I'm the boss. I could stomp into their office and say, "Dang it, you're always late. Shape up." Or I could be just sort of one morning I'm standing at their office and they come in a rush and they're all flustered and embarrassed, and I could say, "So, how was your drive to work today?" But I can wait for the right moment, and usually that right moment involves some pain or trigger that makes them more aware that there's a problem here. When I'm involved in the situation, like it's another person that's doing something that hurts me, proactive waiting looks like me praying, Jesus, send us a situation that brings this out in the open so we can both see it. But I'm partnering with God to say, you have a timetable for this. I'm going to put myself in the position so that when the thing comes up, we're ready to have a decent conversation. Another thing you have to do when you're proactively waiting, if you're in the conflict, is dealing with your own frustration. Because when the moment comes to talk about it, I don't want to be carrying 26 pounds of baggage into the conversation. So I'm dealing with my stuff and giving it to Jesus and waiting, believing that he'll send a moment for it. So the difference between this and avoidance is I'm just hoping it goes away by itself and I don't want to think about it. The proactive part of this is I'm leaning into what God is doing to resolve the situation. Questions or comments on that one? Let's do an example. So I'm going to ask you, you have a good friend. You've watched them over time, and the way they communicate to their spouse is pretty dysfunctional. They have screaming arguments. They are regularly misunderstanding each other. They don't tell each other things that they should tell each other. So it's not a good time to bring it up. What would you do proactively so that when the moment comes where God brings this to the surface, your friend will come talk to you? What kind of things would you do? Let's just see everybody here for a minute, Todd.
I think based on how well I would know them, I think I would just state my observation.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're just waiting. You're not bringing it up yet. What do you do while you're waiting to prepare for the moment?
To keep a good relationship with that person.
Okay. What would you do to keep a good relationship or invest in that relationship?
Spending time and listening to them.
Uh-huh. Okay. What else would you do?
Go to God and deal with your heart stuff.
Okay. So if I'm like despising them in any way in my heart, I want to deal with that. If I'm feeling proud that my marriage is better than yours, I want to deal with that. I want to be clean, because when I come clean into the conflict, then you're not reacting to me. If I've got a bunch of stuff of my own agenda, the other person will react to that. What else can you do?
Not take
Oh, well,
sides.
Okay, not take sides.
yeah, there's a paradigm by a book by Cloud and Townsend that talks about relational nutrients. And they have nutrients of acceptance and then nutrients of affirmation. And then you move into more like a very solid foundation of the first two nutrients, you know, validation, acceptance, and affirmation, all of that.
Okay, good. What do
Maybe
you pray? Sunil, you were going to say something?
also maybe going along with what Karen says to ask God for how he sees that person.
Mm-hmm. One of the, I'm praying to, as well as this other stuff, I'm praying things like, God, send us a situation that brings us up. Or, Jesus, what's your plan for this? Or, Jesus, do you need me to say something or not? And I've got to get a good answer to that question, I've got to be willing for either of those answers for him to answer either way. Right. If my question is, Jesus, I don't have to say something, do I? That's a question that already has an answer in it. So
I might ask.
go ahead.
I might ask a question in the line of what you were saying is, what's the reason why I want to bring this up in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe
good.
Jesus help me to see my motives as well.
Right. Okay. So that's the proactive waiting thing. Now let's get into some things that are more, what do I say, where we're actually bringing something up. So years ago, I was running this internship program. This is my classic example of this. And I asked everybody to read a book, and they were supposed to read a couple chapters. And we come to the first meeting after the reading, and he's talking to me just before the meeting starts, and he's loudly opining on the author of this book and how he's not a good writer, and he's and the stuff in it isn't very good, and all the other people are there listening to this conversation. So afterward, or the next day, we went for a walk, and I said, "So, what do you think of the meeting last night?" And he's like, "Oh man, I have to apologize. I shouldn't have said that stuff about the book." So what's happening there is, what did I do? Let's see if you can figure it out. Why am I asking an open question instead of saying, dude, your comments about the book were inappropriate? What's the benefit of the open question?
You're asking for understanding where he's coming from.
Can you, let's see everybody again, Todd. Can you say that louder?
You're asking to gain understanding.
Okay.
You're giving him permission to say whatever he wants to say.
Okay. So I'm giving him the opportunity to either bring it up or not bring it up. So I'm not controlling whether we go there, but what was happening in him already?
Feeling guilty.
Uh-huh. So God is dealing with him.
Mm-hmm.
So by asking the open question, if God is already dealing with the person and they've become aware of it, I'm giving them the chance to say that without impugning anything to them. So it takes almost no relational capital to do this. And if God's been dealing with the person, what's the difference in how you feel if you bring up one of your mistakes versus someone else brings it up to you? Sterling, what does that change?
Oh, a lot. I'm constantly saying I use that about my own self. Let me figure it out.
Uh-huh.
And so it gives you more ownership.
Okay. So if you figure it out, you own it. And if you own it, you're more likely to do something about it.
Mhm. And
So,
also you don't feel as guilty because
right.
somebody else, you're having to decipher what are they thinking about you as well.
Yeah. One of the things that can happen in a coaching or a mentoring relationship or a pastoral relationship is if there's too much pointing out the negative, you become the stench of death in their life. Whenever they think of you, they think about everything that's wrong with you. So that keeps them from coming to you when they have something because they have a bad feeling about being with you. And you don't want that because when that happens, you've just lost influence. So I want to be the person where people come and they change, but they meet the grace of Jesus in changing and not the finger pointing at you. There may be times where you have to use the finger, but you want to do that as little as possible.
I'm
So,
realizing that the open question also changes the focus from me, I was hurt by the things you said in the meeting,
right,
to them. How did you think about the
yeah,
meeting? So it changes the focus to them.
right. And for me, this is often a first step in a conversation. I want to see if you have any recognition that something happened. If you're totally unaware of it, you might say, "Oh, it was a great meeting, and yeah, I really enjoyed hanging out with people." Okay, now I know that you don't know there was a problem. So I may escalate to another technique, but if you know already, now we've fixed it
Mhm.
and we've made a deposit in our relationship instead of a withdrawal. So that's the reason to do this. So let me give you an example and see if you can come up with some open questions. You see one of your team members in their car in the parking lot after your team meeting arguing with their spouse. If you see him the next day, what might an open question look like? Kumbaya, my lord. Take a shot. What's an open question?
How is your marriage?
Okay. You could say, how's your marriage?
I probably would have said, oh, I noticed there seemed to be some raised conversation last night. Is everything okay? Probably something.
Okay. What's the difference between those two questions? If you're the person being asked,
One's an open, and one, if I heard it correctly, it was a closed question. Is everything okay?
okay? And most people would hear that as an open question unless you did 4 or 5 closed questions in a row. But yeah, you're providing some information in the second one. I saw something. Whereas in the first question, you're not. And the I saw something is actually the next technique we're going to look at, the observation. But for this one, it's you don't usually want to communicate that you know there's a problem. You want to let them bring up the idea that there's a problem. So what else? How's your marriage is good. If we were going to make that a little better.
What about how was your evening last night?
Okay, that's good. How was your day yesterday? How's the fam? How are things going on the marriage front? Yeah. So you want to be enough specific that they know, you get the kind of answer about that thing, but you don't want to say, saw you arguing in the car last night, seemed pretty heated. Is there a problem?
Yeah.
So that's what the open question thing looks like. So we're going to do an exercise here. Just before we do it, everybody needs an agenda. So take a moment and jot down what's one person in your life who does something that annoys you, or what's one coaching client who's doing something that you want to speak to somehow. Get at least one thing, and we'll use those for our breakouts. My son never closes the refrigerator door. Windows Update bricked my computer for the third time. That just happened to me. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll get in groups of like 4. And for this exercise, we'll have 2 of you share your thing, and the group will brainstorm an open question for that. If we were going to ask an open question, what will we do? So we'll do this. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. So we'll do that let's do all 4 of you. See if you can brainstorm an open question for each issue. We won't take very long, so just 90 seconds or 2 minutes on each of you. Okay? Any questions about what you're doing?
So we'll come back in about, 8 minutes then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Ready, break.
All right, here we go.
Hello, Margaret.
Hi,
Where do you live?
Kansas City. Where do you live?
Idaho.
Wow, that's far away.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Todd. Todd, I couldn't hear a thing in that box.
In the breakout room?
Yeah, I didn't hear a thing.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Heck. So you may have discovered as you do that, the indirect technique doesn't work in every situation. If the person has zero awareness of it, it's not going to go anywhere. So this will work best where God is obviously working on someone. They're a tender-hearted person and they're self-reflective about what they do, that kind of stuff. If you get someone who's a blunt and direct person and you say, talk to me about what happened yesterday, they're like, what are you getting at? Just tell me. So you got to vary your techniques with the person. So I want to do a demo quick here and show you the other two. And this is an unrehearsed demo, so we'll see how it comes out. But the two tools that I want to show are observation, and you guys have already given a couple of examples of those. But in an observation, what's important is you restate the facts without analysis. So you don't say, you did this and this and this and this, so you are a. You just say, this and this and this happened, tell me what it means. So that's the observation technique. And the perspective change idea is you create a scenario or an analogy or something that helps them see it from a different vantage point. So Angie's going to help me out here. Look for those two techniques. We'll see if we can get to them both, and we'll discuss afterward how they work. So Angie, tell us in a minute about your situation.
So first of all, I want to apologize. I don't know if you can hear my dogs, but they're going crazy.
No.
Perfect. So I have this coworker, or I used to have this coworker who I don't know what happened, but she just genuinely doesn't like me. And
Can you go to that one incident?
yes, so there was an incident where we were trying to get a client into our program, and I was kind of talking about consents and whatnot, and she ended up yelling at me in front of other coworkers. It was almost very unprofessional from her side in terms of yelling and raising her voice. And then she proceeded to tell people that it was my fault for her yelling at me. I felt very frustrated. A part of me wanted to confront her, but at the same time, because it was a professional setting, I didn't, because it just would have been even more of a mess. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Yeah.
What makes you think that it would have been even more of a mess?
She is a type of person who, when people go against her, she almost lashes out even more so. And I've seen that before with other people. Generally, it's people who are under her, but
Right.
but her and I are about equal standing, if that makes sense. So for me, at work, I tend to want to be a peacekeeper. I tend to like to be more private. So I don't like showing emotions when I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think she does that?
Do you want the therapeutic side of me to answer that
Sure.
question, or do you want my yeah. So I think what I would assume is that my therapeutic side, or who I like, how I am, um, I would think that, there's a lot of insecurities within her. And I also find that, my education is higher than hers. The way I think in terms of my clinical impressions are very different from her. So oftentimes it feels like she has to almost like one up me, for lack of better terms, and feel like she has to prove something, even though it doesn't matter to me. Like I just want to I just want this kiddo to come in and feel warm and welcomed, and at the same time making sure everything is done correctly. Um, but it almost feels like sometimes she does things out of spite.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, you said that you're more of a peacekeeper in that situation. Why did you make that choice? What's behind that?
I find that when I am a peacekeeper at work, it makes things a lot smoother. And also, I find it makes things a lot smoother, and people just trust me, or it's easier to kind of navigate with my coworkers and whatnot. So when I'm professional, when I am a peacekeeper, or even someone who uh, does her job and does it well, I find that people are trusting me a lot easier, or they don't give me as much um, kind of like conflict or pushback uh, than if I were to be very like blunt and whatnot. Because I think in my earlier career, I was exactly who I was, and I found that I actually had more. I was bumping heads a lot more during
Mm-hmm.
that time. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to make an observation here.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had one phase of your life where you were more the confronter bumping heads.
Hmm.
And in this phase of your life, you've been the peacekeeper. But
Yeah.
with this particular individual, that doesn't seem to have worked.
Oh, yeah.
What do you learn from that?
Uh, don't do this kind of job. Uh, but other than I think what I've learned in all seriousness is that there's just going to be some people who don't like you for who you are. And it's not necessarily about me as a person, but it's more about her in terms of her trauma, in terms of her insecurities, and or envy, or whatever it is that's
Let me
going on.
let me make
Yeah.
another observation.
Yeah.
You tell me whether there's anything to this, but it sounds like you had one phase of your life where you went this way,
Yeah.
and another phase of your life where you went this way, but I'm not hearing you say, I look at this person and say, this is the kind of approach that they need, so I'm going to deal with them that way.
Yeah. That is very interesting. I kind of wish that I was working there still, just because then it would be interesting to see if I were to stand up to her, how she would react. Um, but I think this is where it's interesting because, like I was saying before, is that at the beginning of my career, I tend to be very like blunt, or very uh, conflict kind of. I was not conflict averse for sure. Like I welcomed conflict. And oftentimes I still do, so to speak, where I say to people, if you have something, not against me, but if I've done something to hurt your step on your toes or anything like that, like come to me and let me know directly so that, we can have this conversation. I'm not like aggressive about it, because I've learned that does not necessarily work with a lot of people, even though my raw side wants to be like aggressive. But I think definitely the years of being in therapy and various other things like that, I've learned not to be as aggressive as I need to. I'm assertive though. Yeah.
So here's a possible perspective change. I'm doing this as a coach, so I'm going to put it out there as a possibility and let them evaluate. But another way of looking at all this is in terms of how God is developing you. You went through a situation or a season where you were doing your natural style and you were learning
Mhm.
that and what it can and can't do. You went through another season where God kind of reined you in and said, "Hey, you need to learn this other style of doing stuff."
Yeah.
Um, maybe this kicks off a third season that says, "Okay, I did what worked for me, and that didn't work sometimes, so I tried something else to make it work for me. Maybe this next season is about how am I going to do conflict so it works for them."
Mm, that's good.
What do you like
Um,
about that?
yeah, so I think this, and this is so perfect to where I am right now because I'm coming into a season of like venturing off on my own in terms of my own private practice, in terms of encounter coaching and various things like that. And I find myself sometimes going and my personal life as well, that there's a lot of things that are changing right now. And it comes to a good point of um, how do I do conflict that works for other people? And it's not to say like I have to be at a deficit for myself, but more so, how do I do it in a way that works for the both of us, where it's for them, but not at a cost for myself, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. And I think that's actually very brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were going to go back to that situation with this gal and
Hmm.
start from scratch and use a conflict style that worked for both of you, what would you do differently?
I think I probably would have maybe messaged her on separately, just the two of us, to say, hey, I wanted to check in with you because that meeting felt weird, or more so that it felt like you were raising your voice at me, and then having that honest conversation, whether she takes it in or not. I think at least it would have set a tone for our working relationship where, I'm not just leaving it, or we're talking to various other people in between and we're
Right,
kind of getting into that. Um, and this kind of gives, because generally I am very much like that. Like I go straight to the person.
right.
As some people who know me personally in this call know that about me, is I generally am very direct with people. So it's really interesting. I think for the next time, if I were to interact with her again, is to not do it in public, because I think she would feel embarrassed by it, or she would get very defensive or whatnot, but to kind of have a side conversation with her to kind of lay down, like, this is how I was feeling in the meeting. How are you feeling in that meeting? How do
Mhm.
we reach a conclusion or solution together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just for a minute or two debrief here. When I did the perspective change thing, you seemed excited about that.
Yes, very
Why
much
was
so.
that? Because I was challenging your way of thinking.
I think I'm at this season of my life where I think if I was a few years younger, and I didn't go through all of this, like encounter coaching and various things like that, I don't think I would be as um, receiving it as well as I am today. And I find that my personality, and also in my season right now, is that I'm always trying to be better. Especially someone who is I'm in my late 30s. I wanna build the rest of my life in a way that is for God and for people. And when you did that perspective change, and the way that you did it, I know it was supposed to be like kind of hard or whatnot, but
No.
it gave me almost this like aha moment where it's not conflict doesn't necessarily have to be how I feel or perceive it, but it's also the other person as well. And that gave me some excitement where I can change, especially as I'm going into the new season of my life. Yeah. So I really
And
like this.
this is the idea, speaking to the group now, this is the idea of positive challenge or challenging forward. I'm not saying to her, okay, look back at what you did with this person. You should have done better. I'm saying to her, God is taking you to a better future, and here's what it is. So it's just by definition, it's more of a exciting challenge that I can rise to in the future, as opposed to a you're bad change that happened in the past. And the you're bad in the past is always a downer because all I can do is apologize and grovel. I can't undo it. But to say, here's the challenging new thing God is taking to you, it's much easier to say yes to that. So I didn't know when we started if we were going to end up helping you come up with a challenge for this person or what, but it ended up being observations and perspective change about yourself. So show everybody again, Todd. Those of you that were watching, what was interesting that you saw? Or what questions do you have about using this?
I'll go.
Okay.
I noticed that you used a lot of observations as you kind of coached her through it to get where she was before you try to go, lighter with an open question or harder with a perspective change. So you kind of fleshed it out with observations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Somebody else.
But those observations were based off of what she has already said.
Yes.
So you were connecting the dots through the observations for her.
Right.
And you gave her permission to say no.
Yeah. I'm restating facts and I'm asking her to interpret them. So there's a really good example of this that Jesus does in, I think it's Luke 7, where a woman comes and washes his feet with her hair, and one of the Pharisees is there, and he's saying to himself, well, if he knew who this woman was, he wouldn't have done this. Jesus says, well, I got something to say to you. And he says, okay. And then Jesus tells the little story. There were two debtors, and one of them owed 500 days' wages, and the other owed 50, and he forgave them both. Which loved him the most? So that was a perspective change thing. Think of it in terms of love. Think of it in terms of gratitude. Okay, now take a look at this woman, and he makes an observation. You did this, she did this. You did this, she did this. You did this, she did this. And he just states the facts. You didn't wash my feet when I came in, which was a dishonoring thing in that culture. She washed my feet with her hair. And at the end, Jesus chooses to make the interpretation. That's a whole nother technique, observation and interpretation, where you say, here are the facts, this is what I think they mean. But what I showed you today is, here are the facts, what do you think they mean? But a lot of these techniques I got from Jesus.
Good.
Just a bit more of a general observation. I think the demo just kind of walked through what it seems like you're trying to teach us here, which is conflict doesn't have to be about winning or losing.
Right.
And I think that's often my framework that I've looked at things in the past, and so that was just really helpful to see. Oh, this is not about them being right or me being right or who's wrong, or it's about how, like you said, how we move forward in working through it with other people. So I just really appreciated that.
That's part of the beauty of using these in coaching. You don't have to win. You don't have to be right. They're the one that decides what it means. So yeah. Anything else?
Well, yeah, just to build on what Pamela said, I think one of the things that was fascinating for me is how took this difficult situation and helped Angie reinterpret it as a growth opportunity for her personally, rather than how do I fix this problem to how am I growing and changing through this experience.
or gee, I'm glad that was over.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's helped her shift to how does it affect me to how can I shift my focus to others and to God
Right.
in my work.
And it can also change, like Angie, what that interpretation means is that God sent that person into your life to bring something specific about your destiny to the surface so that you could, how does that change how you look at this other woman?
I'm assuming I'm gonna have to answer that question.
Yes.
Because not.
You're still thinking about it, I'm sure, but
So for okay, there's
Sorry.
me now. I think for me it gave me after our demo it gave me a chance to see her with more grace and also from God's eyes, because I was just so in those moments of interacting with her
Right.
while I was working there. I was so in the midst of my own feelings or trying really hard to be professional about it regardless of what she's doing. But now, as I'm thinking about her, I definitely have more grace and also kind of seeing her from God's eyes and what does that look like? How does God see her? And I think that's where things are changing for me.
Awesome. All right, over to you, Todd.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Johnny, for doing this.
You're welcome.
Our goal is to corral him in at about twice a month. And so if you can, join, would love to have you do that. We'll also love your feedback. So if you get a chance, if you go into the Encountering Jesus community, what did you get from this session? What did you learn?